Welcome back. In section 2, Intermediate Scripting Logic Controllers, we talked about different types of controllers, their usage, as well as different conditions that can be added based on which we can control the execution of samplers, as well as we saw some examples of it. Now in this section, Samplers Request, we will talk about different types of samplers. Now samplers can be used to send requests to the server, and there are different types of requests that can be sent. So let's see what are those different types. With the help of SMTP Sampler, we can send requests to mail server, and it uses an SMTP or SMTPS protocol for it. We will be talking about an SMTP Sampler configuration, as well as we will write sample script to send email to the configured mail server. After that, we will be talking about Jdbc Sampler, which can be used to test a database server. Now here we can send a Jdbc request, which is basically an SQL query, to the database, and we will explore this with the help of a sample script. After that, we will talk about the file transfer protocol, with the help of which we can send retrieve file or upload file request to an FTP server, and in order to execute command on the local machine, we can use OS process sampler, and we will look at it with the help of an example sample script. So let's begin. So let's start with the very first topic of this section, which is an SMTP sampler request. Now here we will learn how we can configure and set up the SMTP sampler request, which will send a request to mail server, and how we can configure it to generate an automated email from JMeter. So let's begin. Now consider a situation where you have a test plan and number of test cases set up in JMeter, and you want to know the test execution status or specific parameters or values of the test result at the end of the execution, and you want all these details in the form of an email. Now in that case, we can make a use of an SMTP sampler request, and if your organization already has SMTP server set up, then you can just use the SMTP sampler request, configure it to the SMTP server, and start receiving emails. Now, if you are trying to use this on your personal or local machine where you do not have an SMTP server, then you can follow the same steps that I'm going to follow in this video. For the demonstration of this video, we are going to set up an SMTP server on our local machine using Docker. For this, we will be using container mail dev, which is here, and this container has two services running on it, an SMTP service and web service, that's HTTP. An SMTP service runs on port 25, which is specified here, and we will be exposing the same port on our local machine. The HTTP web service runs on port 80, which is specified here in the container and is exposed on the local machine at port 1080. Now let's hit enter and it will create a container for us. Alright, after that, what you can do is you can just go to the browser and go to the localhost 1080 and check if your mail server has been configured, and if you see the screen, that means it has been configured successfully. Now after that, remember we do not have to start the server here because we have already created and it's running unless and until you stop it manually. Now after that, what you can do is go to the JMeter, and here we need to set up an SMTP sampler request, and for that we need thread group. Inside that we will add SMTP sampler from the sampler. So select that. Alright, so now we have SMTP sampler here. Now we need some configuration details here. Now since we are using the local server, the server name here will be 0.0.0.0. Now you can have any other server name based on your organization server settings or other details, but since we are using local server and it's running on the local machine, we can set it to 0000, and we have a port number which is 25. That's where we set up our service. After that, we can have an email address. So let's say I'm going to use an email address which is blogger.afsanaa@outlook.com, and from the email address and to email address will be athar.afsana@consulseer.com, where we want to send the email. After that, we have some details. Now if you are using another, let's say Google or Yahoo mail server, then you can provide the authentication details like username and password. Now in our case, it's not required. And since we are using on our local machine, there is no security feature as such. So select the option as no security features. And after that, we have some details such as the email body itself, like we have a subject, we have a message, and we have other details. So we can set a message. Let's say we want to set up it as test email from JMeter to Afsana, something like that, and we can add more details here. And then once you have set up, then what you can do is you can go ahead and add a listener, view results tree, and view results table, so that you can view the test execution details. So let's add view results in table. All right. So that's how you can configure your SMTP sampler for your test of the email. And that's how you can set up an email server on your local machine using Docker. Now in this video, we talked about how we can add SMTP sampler details, such as how we can set it up using the server port number. We also set up the address to and from and other details such as subject, but we haven't done yet. We have to add some details in the message of the email